Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alia in the U.S. higher ed sector. Just to make it clear, Alia is A11Y because there are 13 letters in accessibility. So A plus 11 letters plus Y gets you that really long word. And we shorten it because it makes it easier for everyone. So our objectives for today, we're going to do introductions. That's going to be about me. I'm going to give you a little disclaimer. We're going to talk about how to fix the most common issues we found in your sector. I have a couple of final thoughts, and then there's probably going to be time, so we'll do some Q&A at the end if you guys have questions. Feel free to put things in the chat in the meantime. So, about me. My name is Jessica Chambers. I've been at Silktide for, we need to update that. It's 11 years. Last week. And my one claim to fame is that I was immortalized as a minor character in a video game. Since people asked, I put in a screenshot. It's World of Warcraft. So the disclaimer, right? A couple things to cover here. One, I have a lot of feelings about WCAG, and especially with 2.2 coming, we are going to talk about one of the 2.2 checks today. Most of the things we're going to cover today are fairly non-technical. That's kind of my aim, is to give you things you can easily fix. There is one that is technical. I will warn you when we get there. And don't worry, it's something you just need to be aware of so that you can potentially pass it on to your devs. The other disclaimer, I want to talk about perfect scores. So when it comes to automated testing, we can automate up to about 40% of what WCAG requires. Full compliance is always going to require manual audits, right? But it saves everyone a lot of time and gives you a lot more chance to see your whole web estate if you do automated testing first, right? We can kind of keep you on top of a bunch of different things. And then over time, you can get a full audit done on what is usually only a handful of pages, where you look at your templates and your forms and in more detail and things like that. So I always want to put that out there. Even if you have a score of 100, it's probably not perfect. So let's talk about accessibility in the US higher ed. This is this month's graph. So we go from 99 all the way down to 14. It's worth noting that half of your scores are at least 71 or higher. I mean, that's pretty good. There were 905 sites tested in what we considered enough pages, etc., for this month. And honestly, it's also worth noting you need a 92 to make it into the top 30. So well done on a bunch of you. And some of you need a bit more help, so feel free to reach out to us after. So let's talk about the most common issues we found, what they are, why they matter, and how to fix them. The biggest one, same link text, different destination. This was on 93% of the websites we tested, so there's a good chance that everyone here has this problem. The idea here is that if you have a link that points to something, say, contact us, and on the same page, you have another link that says contact us, but it goes somewhere else, that's really confusing to anyone who's using a screen reader. As an example, this is a series of blog posts from a local council on my side of the pond, where it says changes to recycling box collections this week. And then there was another blog post, and it says changes to recycling box collections this week. Now, there's no way to be certain those are going to different places. It makes it really difficult, as I said, and they didn't even have like contact us. This was a lengthy link text. Text contrast. It does matter. Keeping the text contrast solid enough that you can actually perceive the text on the background really makes a lot of difference. The notes here says this will all make sense in a minute, because this is going to be our first audience participation moment. So I'm really big on audience participation. I love doing this because I like making people think about things a little bit differently. So this one is all about the visuals. So can you read this? This is a read more link. It's white text on a pink background, but the text is fairly bold, so it should be fairly discernible to everyone here, right? What about this? So this also says read more, but the font has much of a lesser weight. It's not bold, it's quite thin. But I suspect most of our visual users on the call can actually perceive the read more on the second one. Now I'm going to ask you to squint. If you squint your eyes at the screen, you may find that the one on the right, the read more that isn't bold, just kind of disappears. That's why color contrast matters. And this is one of the easiest ways you can check quickly to see if your color contrast is okay. Yeah, it's not going to catch your edge cases, right? Where maybe you need 3 to 1 and you're at like 2.8 to 1, but it is going to catch it when it's bad. Which leads us to form control contrast. Same concept, right? This is 83% of websites. But if you look at this form and you squint, you're going to see the same kind of thing happening. These borders that are around the boxes, they just aren't good enough. They need to be bolder and darker so that it's clear where the form fields are. Staying on forms, autocomplete. This is 72% of the websites tested. My note says, everyone loves the magic of autocomplete on form fields. This is something that your developers have to sort out for you. But when you are making a form, you can define what the form fields are. So, that thing where like you start to type in it, it's like, oh, do you want your name and your email and things like that? And it just fills it in what feels like kind of like magic. Totally doable and something that you should be aware of. A lot of websites turn it off, and that's particularly bad and is going to become an issue in the new version of WCAG because you can't do that for passwords, for example. So, ensure controls change appearance when they're selected. This is an important one because when people are using their keyboards to navigate, right? Like imagine you can't use your mouse. I know, kind of a thing. I talked to a few companies that do mouseless days. They tell everyone to stop using it so they can experience the web without it. When you're migrating around the page or navigating around the page, you know where you are because of what we call focus states, right? This is the controls change appearance when they're selected. Yes, WCAG has fantastic language for things. It's worth noting that this ties into something that's coming in 2.2. So 74% of the websites we tested flag for this, which is the most basic, like, do you have focus states defined, right? The percentage jumps to 85 when we look at the new check that's coming, that's ensure controls clearly indicate when they're selected. I know, see the language, but that's essentially saying your focus state has to follow some rules. So hitting the 85% meant I really needed to talk to you guys about this. A focus state is different than a hover state, right? You've almost all seen hover, right? When you're moving your mouse around and you go over something that's interactive and kind of like, in this case, we've highlighted it with like a little blue box around Taffy the kitty, right? So it's like really pretty, tends to go with the website, Focus states only show up when someone's using an alternative navigation method, right? Buttons, the tab key on their keyboard, things like that, right? You can't get it with your mouse unless you really try. So my main point here is that no one sees a focus state who doesn't need it. So that issue of like the bright contrasting color looks ugly, or your designer doesn't like it because they say it doesn't go with the website. Trust me, I've heard every reason in the book, but the reality is the focus states are basically hidden unless you need them. So it's important to bear that in mind, right? This is about usability of the website. And I am a huge proponent of the go big or go home, right? Two images here. One is of our fake little cat book website where you can see the red box around an icon in the top right. And then we kind of zoomed in on it to be like, see, this is what we're trying to get at. It should be a bright contrasting color. It should be thick, right? Some of the new rules basically say it has to be like 2 pixels and a bunch of other things. But if you just aim for bright contrasting color and a thick line, you'll get there. So, audience participation again. Don't worry, we only do this a couple times. So, what I'm going to ask everyone to do right now is to close your eyes. I know this is strange, but trust me, it'll be worth it. So, keep them closed. No cheating. Okay, open your eyes. Where are we on the page? Just give me dogs, right? This is why it matters. If you get distracted, if the phone rings, the doorbell goes, how do you know where you were on the page? So don't make this hard. My complaint on this is always fairly simple. The minimum should be this, right? Ignoring what 2.2 says, aim for bright, thick, contrasting color, right? This matters. There is no question where I have selected. And when you think about the fact that you have to hit the tab key a bunch of times to get there, it really helps if something happens and I look back that I know exactly where I am so I can figure out, is this what I needed or do I need to keep moving around on the page? Okay, this one's called Ensure Links Explain Their Purpose. It's a AA check, and 86% of the websites we tested have flagged for this. This is about link text, right? Links explaining their purpose, right? It's the question of where does it go? So I've got a couple of paragraphs up here to give you an example. The content doesn't matter, but for those who care, it is bacon ipsum, which does the lorem ipsum thing of generating text, except it's almost all like cuts of meat, which makes me laugh. What we've done here is highlighted some links. It's worth noting we underlined all of them because underlining your links is good. What we've got is click here, here, read more, and click here, right? These links don't really tell you much. If you're using a screen reader, you can actually skip around the links and not get any of the other text, which gives you links without context. And now we've got click here, here, read more, and click here, and everything around it isn't being read. So it's not like you're getting a statement and then read more, right? Everyone should consider this. Please stop using click here and read more links. They're just really not useful. And honestly, you can make simple little changes that just makes it better for everyone who's using the website. This ties into the links should work for screen readers, right? This is 83% of the websites we tested. This is an example of one of the ones we stumbled onto. It's using buttons and empty links to, say, increase the text size without any kind of alt text or link text. There's no way to know what these buttons and empty links do. There was no way to interact with them properly. You can use Aria. Trust me, we are not going to get into that. There's ways to make sure that this provides the additional information for people who can't see it and interact with it the same way. But again, this is happening on so many websites that we need to talk about it, right? No empty buttons, no empty links. You need link text, you need alt text. It matters. This is the technical one. I know you might be thinking, some of those sounded technical. So write lists of groups of links semantically. So again, 87% of the websites tested, no messing around here. This is about grouping your links. This is probably a discussion to have with your devs, but I'm just going to give you an overview of what this means, right? So if you label your navigation, right, like nav ID, you can give it labels with Aria, like say global, right? But you keep your links together as an unordered list, the little bullet points. And that way, anyone who's using a screen reader, for example, can see that this is global navigation, right? And see all the links together as a group and be like, is this the area of the website I need? Right? So like your top level navigation, your footer, right? Like, is it a directory? All of these things help people understand what they're seeing, and what they're interacting with. It's just a little bit of extra thought and a little bit of extra time. It goes a long way to taking care of a big problem. So this is a AAA check, but particularly in higher ed, I want to talk about this. It's ensure content is not too difficult to understand. So this is basically readability. Like, in a nutshell, 85% of the websites flagged for this. And while I'm an English speaker, and I suspect most of you are English speakers, the reality is that the students who are coming to your sites are not probably the ones you need to worry about. You need to worry about their parents, right? If a student is coming to an English speaking university, you expect that they have a fluency suitable for education levels, right? But their parents, there is no guarantee, and they need to know what their child is studying, whether or not this feels like the right place for them. It's a big ask, and it matters. In the US, the average reading age is only 13, and the Department of Education says anything higher than a reading age of 13 is considered difficult to read. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So this one says, readability is a measure of how difficult it is to comprehend text. This one says, this test is a way to measure how old you would need to be to understand a piece of text. The first one is a reading age of 16. The second one is a reading age of 11. I am keenly aware of how hard it is to keep your reading age down, right? It's not easy. Removing polysyllabic words is a difficult thing to do, but it's something you can be bearing in mind while you're writing text, right? Something you can pass along and be like, this is something we can consider. I know, for example, all the chemistry departments in the world hate me. There's certain things you just can't change, right? But being aware of this and taking it into consideration while you're adding things to the website and doing course descriptions and things like that can make a big difference. One of the last things I want to talk about is PDFs. They flag for A and AA stuff. I don't really want to dive into what goes wrong with PDFs. Trust me, I think we have an hour-long presentation on PDFs. 80% of the websites, we found PDFs that had problems. So it's everybody, right? PDFs will never be truly accessible. All you need to do is open one on your mobile phone, and you'll see exactly what I mean. I understand why they're popular. I understand why people like them. We use them in Silktide too, right? The best thing you can do if you love PDFs is to make sure you provide an alternative format, right? We recommend HTML, but the reality is a Word doc, other options really. And I believe there's even a new ODF, which is like open document format, which helps with some of the issues that PDFs have, because as an example, you can't enlarge the text on a PDF. It's just what it is. So you can use them. I won't say you can't, even though I hate them. But I do think it's an important thing to consider. Again, just like the other issues, these are all things you just need to be aware of, right? You can remediate your PDFs, you can make them better, right? It is a time-consuming, unpleasant process. It's best to do it as early as possible when you're making them. But if you're in a situation where you're going to make a lot of PDFs, one of the best ways around the problem is to say, here's the alternative format in HTML, and we know that that's accessible and people can actually interact with it. And they can use it on their phone. I always put this up here. my inaccessible PDFs everywhere. It's Buzz Lightyear and Woody. I love memes. So, a couple of final thoughts. I want to talk about something called digital precarity. Last year, someone called Quinn East put up a post on Twitter, and they said, I think about digital precarity a lot from the perspective of being deaf. For now, live captions on calls and through hacky workarounds work well enough to get by, but if they're dropped, under-resourced, or under-prioritized, boom, I'm alone and on the outside. And the reason that this really resonated with me this year is because when Twitter started their massive layoffs, they let go of the entire accessibility team in one go. There was no one left. And then in January, we got this. This is Ashley M. Boyer saying, just learned that Twitter Spaces shut down closed captions. Still digging for official comms on it. This sucks. Basically 2 years of accessibility progress down the darn drain. And someone had responded and quote tweeted, very disappointing to see that Twitter Spaces has apparently ditched captioning entirely. I'd hoped the reports were due to a temporary glitch, but evidently it's a permanent decision. Big loss for an inclusion and accessibility. It was that fast. Quinn posted in September talking about it last year. And by the end of January, Twitter Spaces had ditched their automatic captioning. Look, automatic captioning is not the best thing ever, right? It's got problems. You can see it in Zoom videos where, it may take a word like analytics and decide it's a swear, so it like stars the word out. But it's so much better than nothing. The nothing just completely cuts people out. I need to mention that we are on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/Silktide, we have lots of videos to tell you about overlays, to teach you about some of the new stuff that's coming in 2.2. We have a Don't Be Afraid of series, which is all kind of cartoony and filled with jokes to teach you some basic things about web accessibility, like keyboard navigation and what WCAG actually is. These are meant to be usable, free, and shareable. Most of the videos that aren't like webinars are quite short. They're usually under 3 minutes. They're here to provide you information, and hopefully if you're laughing, you're learning. So that's something I'm a big proponent of. So thank you for listening. Let's do Q&A. And for the record, my joke here is it's like AMA, ask me anything on Reddit, but safe for work. Anyone have questions? And if you don't have questions, does anyone want to share how they've been doing with accessibility? Okay, question from Matthew. For form contrast, if you have a dark background, do you still need the high contrast? You still always need contrast, but the form controls with a dark background gets you an interesting place because there's a good chance you've made your box white, which actually gets you there, right? So for what it's worth, like if you've got a white box on, say, a black background, you're in a much better place. Can you explain a bit more about the Aria tag and what it's good to use? Okay, Aria. Recently, I stumbled onto something that said that it was the maxims of Aria. So they said, never use it unless you have to. Always use it when you have to. And the third one was, you're doing it wrong. Aria is tough. It does not have universal support, which is why I'm always iffy about it. There isn't, like, if you look at everything that Aria does, and then you look at the different screen reader combinations like JAWS and Chrome or JAWS and Internet Explorer and VDA, you find that there isn't a universal of like all of this is supported which makes it difficult to use it. However, some of them, like Aria labels, have universal support. So you can use Aria labels for, I can't believe I'm about to say these words, for read more links. So you can change what gets read out to a screen reader if you really love your read more links. You can have like read more, and Aria can give you about something something, right, to provide more clarity. We recommend that you look at just changing the link text in general because we think it benefits everyone. But the reality is Aria provides a lot of options for things like that. It can be really useful for providing longer descriptions for alt text. And it can be useful, as I said before, like when you're grouping your navigation and whatnot. That's a perfect example of when Aria really shines, because it's a nice way to say that's what this grouping of links is. Because visually I can say, oh, that's the top navigation, right? That's the footer. But when it comes to, you're asking the good questions. When it comes to the like screen reader, if they're not grouped together with things like Aria labels, it's a lot more difficult for them to assess which section a link is in. So hopefully that helps. What's coming in 2.2? Well, they keep changing it. I wish that wasn't true, but it is. Over the past year, I've given multiple presentations on 2.2, and they keep going, oh, not that. The main things I think you want to be aware of with 2.2 is the size of targets. You'll see on our screen, we have 24 pixels on this. That's about mobile phones, right? So it's about how big things are if you need to tap them with your finger, right? Anything that's interactive. I could go into that, but trust me, you're just going to want to look into it. It's not a super hard concept, but ideally they need to be big enough that like it isn't as much of a question when you tap whether or not you wanted that one or the one next to it. And the other super important one is the change to focus states, where they're changing it so that how the focus state looks matters, right? So like I'm saying, big, thick, contrasting colors, right? That's pretty much the most important thing you need to know. There's a lot of rules for this. It's been going back and forth for a year. They're still figuring out exactly how they want to define this, which is why I'm like, just set that aside and let's think about what the spirit of the rule is. Like, what are they trying to achieve versus like, oh, there's an exception if you do it this way. You know what I mean? Like, just and the other one you should definitely be aware of is that if you have sticky menus, and this applies to cookie banners for anyone who's using them, you can't cover up what's on the screen, right? If you do, like say you put up your cookie banner and you like put a scrim behind it, right? So it's like cookie banner, and then you kind of like make it look like your site's grayed out. You need to keyboard trap the users into the cookie banner pop-up, right? The problem is if they can tab to things or try to interact with things that are behind it and they can't see them visually, you've got a major problem, right? It's an awful experience for anyone who isn't using a mouse. And honestly, like, you just shouldn't do it. We see it come up a lot with sticky menus. That's the one that I go like, that's the thing in the US versus the cookie banners, which is always a problem over here. If you want a menu that like stays, then bear that in mind. One of the best things I can say about this is that you need to load up your website and just hit the tab key, right? Just bounce around your website and have a look, because you might be surprised what you see, but that gets you an idea of how your focus states look, the order they're moving around in, right? Do they go someplace that seems logical to you? Or are you like, whoa, why did it move over there, right? There's so much you can see yourself with just one button. What do you think about the instant accessibility plugins like Accessibility? I can tell you that I literally just got back on Monday from the largest accessibility technology conference in the world, and we made stickers that say "Friends don't let friends use overlays." I think we had one that said "Death to overlays" too. Those were gone on the first night. That's what we just I don't recommend them. Almost everything that you would think they're cool for doing is settings that anyone who uses like Windows or iOS would be setting on like the system and browser level, right? If they need to zoom in, they've got software for that, right? If they need high contrast, they have software for that. They don't want to set it every time they go to a website. You know what I mean? Like they're making those decisions. And frankly, a lot of the things don't work because not every website, for example, respects the prefers reduced motion, which is essentially a way to like stop things moving around on the page. But if you didn't build your website to respect it, it doesn't actually do anything if they turn it on. And again, that's a setting that browsers already have. So if you need reduced motion, like that's not something that you're going to get from that. Um, Also, for what it's worth, when it comes to the AI will save us, will fill in your alt text and things like that. It's notorious for the things it pulls in because it can describe the image, right? Like a redheaded woman with a black cat, right? But it can't give you the context that you need when you're writing alt text. I think everyone who looks at them needs to be really careful. I refer everyone to the overlay fact sheet. I will even write this down because something like 700 people have signed this. Also, it's just a nice rundown on what's going on with the overlays and how they work. I think it's possible in a few years that something like Accessibility will be able to use AI to actually help, but they're not there yet. And I think presenting it as like the pay us $50 a month and we'll solve all your problems, man, there's a bunch of things like that I wish were true. You know, whether it's like instant diet pills or the shampoo that will make my hair grow, like it's what we all wish for, isn't it? And I think that's the problem. Any suggestions for when we gather students who use screen readers to test new accessibility features on our website? Oh, that's a really great idea. I'm a huge proponent of getting people who actually use screen readers daily to do user testing. It's super important because look, if you do accessibility testing like I do, right? I use a bunch of them, right? I use VoiceOver, I use JAWS, I use NVDA. On occasion, I load up Narrator, but only when I have to. But like, because I use a bunch of them, I'm not anywhere near as au fait or skilled in it as someone who actually uses a specific combination every day, right? So I love the idea, right? I would explain what the new thing was you were adding and ask if they want to help. When it comes to students, ask them what they need from you. You know, like how you can facilitate it. And I might even suggest that if you're dealing with screen readers specifically, make sure that you've got a couple of not visually impaired people, because people with ADHD and other things actually use screen readers. So I would open it up past just we're looking for people with visual impairments who use screen readers, you know, and just kind of open it up a bit to see what you might get. There are a small number, but they are out there, people who use their mouse and still use a screen reader. Like the huge 400% focus in or zoom and mouse, right, with the screen reader because they can't actually read the text. So there's a lot of different options out there. And I would think about whether or not you can do it on Zoom or Teams or whatever one you use, because asking them to come together might actually be more difficult than getting everyone on Zoom and letting them talk and share their experiences and share their screens with you. Is there a screen reader software for Mac users? Yes, it is built in. It is called VoiceOver. And I love my phone. We have a book that I should probably mention to you guys. We've done a field guide to mobile screen readers to kind of introduce how it works on a phone. But it's the same concept. VoiceOver is on your phone and it's on your Mac. It is built in, it's free, which is kind of awesome. And it's surprisingly easy to turn on. Like I can just tell Siri, turn on VoiceOver and turn off VoiceOver because I'm not great at using it. But it's kind of important because depending on where you live in the world, JAWS, which is the #1 screen reader, period, because everyone uses Windows, it can cost as much as $1,000, right? I think they offer it to regular people at $100 a year in the US these days, which is kind of great because the price was a bit prohibitive for a lot of people. Can you give an example of link descriptions within running text? Is hyperlinking chemistry in a sentence to internal link to that major or bad idea? Oh, right. Okay. So one of the things you want to think about here is like, if I link to the word chemistry, I'm actually going to expect that I'm going to get a definition, right? The single word makes me think you're going to explain it. If you were talking about like that major, chemistry undergraduate degree, like you need words that make it clear where you're going, right? And the way I try to think about it is blanking out the rest of the text, right? And being like, this link by itself, do I know where it's going? Or if I've just got chemistry, is that the department? Is that the undergrad course syllabus? Is that the definition? Like, how would I know where that single word is going to take me? Moving on. Speaking of AI, is Silktide looking at AI tools like ChatGPT? I love AI. Like, I'm going to tell you what might be an embarrassing story. So, 11 years ago, I started at Silktide, right? And we did website testing software. We didn't do accessibility testing at the time. That came a little while later. And my coworker spent a week with his eyes closed, learning how to use a screen reader. And it terrified me, to be perfectly honest, because I said to them, like, without my eyeglasses, I'm legally blind, right? I can't read my screen. I can't even get close enough to it to read it. So I was like, oh my God, this could be my future. And I had never even considered it. And we were talking about what we wanted. Like if you knew you only had 12 months where your vision was going to degenerate, what would you spend that 12 months doing, right? Would it be to travel and look at things, would it be to try to make a better screen reader? Or would it be to educate people and try to fix the web so that the screen readers didn't have to like make up for so many things that are wrong? And I said, I want the librarian. I am a nerd. There is an old book written by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash, and there is a concept of an AI that essentially is like a search engine, right? Where you can have conversations with it and say things like, can you explain how this works? Can you explain how this works tied into this other concept, right? It's like an educator. And I have been over the moon about this idea since I read the book 20 something years ago. So that was my first thought, right? I was like, I want the librarian. And last week, the link up between Bing and ChatGPT, we are so close. I mean, like, we are on the cusp of the librarian, where you can be like, can you tell me about this concept? And because it's parsing and then giving you, right? Like I hated Siri because I would be like, do I need an umbrella? Because I thought that was a cool idea. And then it would give me the weather, right? But what I want is a yes or a no. Also, I want it verbal. I didn't want like a picture of today's weather report. So this new stuff they're doing is really cool. And Oliver, our CEO, is completely enamored with AI and has been for a very long time. So yeah, we've been trying to use AI for a lot of years. One of the earliest versions of the platform I was around for was actually using some really basic machine learning to compare pages in your website and tell you if the design was good or not, or if you had enough variation in the design. Swear to God. So yes, there's no way we are not going to be using more AI tools like that. We just not 100% sure yet how we're going to do it. For those of us who work on web content, but also will be working with our institution's community on educational front, will there be in the future resources on Oh, look at you, pedagogically how to communicate with a general audience? I believe the way you're doing this webinar is a strong foundation how we can share this information out. Oh, thank you. Also, I love your headset and gamer chair. Right? Got the mouse and everything. Okay, so we are trying to do more education and outreach in YouTube. Also, I've got a presentation that title's still getting worked out. But if you liked the things like, squinting at the screen, we do a whole thing on alt text. We use part of that in the video. Don't be afraid of alt text. I have about 30-40 minutes where we walk you through some basics of like web accessibility awareness, right? Where instead of like going, here's the issue and this is how you fix it, we talk about how a screen reader works, how keyboard navigation works, why focus states matter, right? Because they tie in, right? You give the concept of this is how you navigate without a mouse, and then you say, do you understand now why the focus states suddenly are a big deal, right? But we're not going to get into like how you make focus states, right? It's totally non-technical. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email address in here because I love that presentation. I think it's fantastic. And frankly, I want to get it in front of more people to be like, look, it doesn't have to be scary, right? It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be the WCAG specs, which frankly, no one wants to read, right? I think the main thing that is my goal is to get people to care, right? So that's what I try to do, right? Is to be like, here's reasons you can care. Here's things you probably never thought of, right? And no kidding, we do the ethical case, the business case, and the selfish case for accessibility. Because at the end of the day, this could happen to you. Is there any way to make sticky navigation accessible with regards to the content behind it? Push the content down. That's my answer to sticky menus. That's my answer to cookie banners, right? There's a way to do it where like the banner opens and the content moves, right? Rather than it sitting on top of the content. For what it's worth, in 2.2, you are allowed partial, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, partial obfuscation, right? So like you can cover up part of it. But when I talk about this in webinars properly, I've got a bunch of examples from live websites where like, I know it's their social media buttons, but I'm seeing like this much of the top of it, and that would actually allow it to pass. Again, this is why we don't like love the rules. We say, well, what are they trying to get you to do? Which is not hide it. But if I can just see the top, and I think that kind of looks like the blue of Facebook, and then I'm like, oh, hey, that's your social media icons, right? But that's bad, right? I shouldn't have to guess because you put something on top of it. I don't think sticky navigation is necessarily bad.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Go away, Siri. I think there are ways to use it that are actually quite cool, right? And honestly, I'm going to say it, I like having my top navigation available most of the time, right? Because what if I want it? But I think it's important to take into consideration, like, are you covering things up? And again, it's pretty simple to check for yourself, at least on a couple of pages, right? Hit your tab key, it will shift you down the page as you go, right? And when that happens, you can see where the sticky nav is, right? Or your cookie banner, or whatever it is that happens to be covering up the page. And what matters is whether or not, when it automatically moves you and the page scrolls, is it covering anything up, right? That is tabbed to. Whatever the active element is, it needs to not be covered up. What content is most helpful to a screen reader user in place of virtual 360 tour? Oof. Okay. The virtual tours are amazing. And as a visual person, I love them, right? I love being able to see and be like, oh, cool. Like, is this a place I'd want to go? Like, I love that Google Maps lets you go in some buildings. So you can be like, ooh, neat, right? However, the problem with that is simple. It is a completely visual experience. So if you can't see, you need to think about what you are trying to share, what you're trying to tell people, right? So think about what the message is, what you can actually take away from it that isn't like, look at this painting. This is going to seem like a side note, but I swear it's related. I love the Cultural Tutor on Twitter. There's a lot of educational resources out there. They're great, right? And someone complained to them about using alt text, being like, I can't share your stuff because you don't use alt text. I was like, that's how I feel about it. And I saw a bunch of alt text show up yesterday, but they're literally the names and dates for the paintings, not what the painting is. And I found myself being like, oh my God, you really did not get the point. When you're showing someone the tour, right? What are the highlights, right? You want to think about it like, how do I describe this? What actually matters? And it may make you think, because little things like while you're thinking about it, are there a set of stairs? Is there, another method of transversing the area? Someone set up a cool Zoom background and I was like, oh, you see that? I was like, not an accessible space, right? Because I now think about it in a way I didn't before. So this could be an interesting opportunity to look at it from a new perspective. But yeah, it always comes down to like, what is the message here? What do you get from it? And how do you convey that in a different format? I mean, obviously, yeah, you're gonna lose, some of the cool, like, scrolling around like see things, but at the same time, like describing the campus, the environment, some of the more prominent features, things that are there, like that can get you a similar kind of effect. Thank you all so much. It means so much to me that people care and want to make their websites better. I'm a firm believer that that is the biggest hurdle, is getting that first bit of like, I recognize that this matters and I want to make a difference. If everything you do, every bit of information you take in, every bit of change you make in the website, in the environment, in getting other people in the team to care, all of these things change the world a little bit at a time. I hope this was helpful. If there's anything I can do to help, please reach out.